Sauber's final season before officially becoming the works Audi Formula 1 team next year started disastrously. The car was a nightmare to drive and off the pace. A repeat of the team's dismal 2024 season, or worse, seemed inevitable. As new signing Nico Hülkenberg put it, in Bahrain pre-season testing, Sauber was in major trouble and things looked very grim. The race ranked the Sauber 10th and last in its pre-season testing performers, and with good reason. The car looked stiff, ungainly, unpredictable and slow. And while the lap times in isolation are largely meaningless, it was telling that Sauber was rock bottom. The drivers struggled with a car that had to be set up in a narrow window mechanically, and that led to a lack of confidence, comfort and consistency. What was concerning is that the car did not behave on track as the team's simulations suggested, which technical director James Key admits was a carryover of problems that had blighted Sauber last season. In 2024, Sauber finished last in the championship and scored points only once, for Zhou Guanyu's 8th place in the Qatar Grand Prix. That was thanks to a floor upgrade introduced 3 races from the end of the year in Las Vegas. The hope was that this represented a technical corner being turned. And it was much needed. Having started the current regulation era in 2022 strongly with 9 top 10 finishes in the first 9 races and a haul of 51 points, its form slumped. The next 59 events to the end of last year yielded a feeble 24 points, comfortably the worst tally of any team. Audi started to acquire Sauber in 2022, eventually owning 100% of the team before selling a minority stake to Qatar's sovereign wealth fund last year. This means that although it doesn't take the Audi name until next year, racing initially as Alfa Romeo, then under the current stake/kick moniker, and is still using Ferrari engines until the end of 2025, effectively, this already is its team. The lack of on-track results, combined with the upheaval of the ousting of former McLaren team principal Andreas Seidel as Sauber CEO and chairman Oliver Hoffmann last July, with Mattia Binotto appointed COO and Chief Technical Officer, suggested Audi was on a trajectory for failure. Even on the occasions the car was a genuine points threat on pace in 2023 and 24, which was rare, there were often too many mistakes operationally to capitalise on that. So the hope was that 2025 would be a fresh start. However, the struggles in pre-season testing, where Sauber looked to be not just at the back but off the rear of the field, suggested that progress was non-existent. Fortunately for Sauber, there was an upturn by the time the cars hit the track for the first event of the season in Australia. The improvement was clear for me watching trackside during the first free practice session, where the car looked more convincing to the point where it seemed capable of challenging for a place in Q2. Gabriel Bortoleto made good on that promise by scraping into the second stage of qualifying by 7 thousandths of a second, describing the car as feeling a bit better but still not where we want it to be. So what changed? Well, Sauber introduced a new front wing, having used the 2024 version in pre-season testing, floor and bodywork modifications, and what Key described as under-the-skin changes. Key describes this as the intended race car for 2025, with the late arrival of parts a consequence of the decision to maximise the development time before producing the components. That contributed to the testing struggles. Hülkenberg claimed Sauber's best result for 33 months with 7th place in Australia, albeit only as a consequence of a sharp call to pit for intermediates while on course for a finish well outside the top 10. The fact this was the sole points finish in the first 8 events of the season is telling. The car could get into Q2 during this phase of the year, but despite regular upgrades the car remained difficult to drive. On fresh tyres over a single lap it was possible, if tricky, to get a fast lap time out of the car. However, in race conditions, the Saubers usually struggled more. All F1 cars struggle in turbulent airflow, but as sporting director Iñaki Rueda admitted in April, it was a particular weakness of the Sauber. Troubles in turbulence are usually indicative of aerodynamic instability. With these cars, that's a particular danger given not only the risk of airflow stalls on the top body, but also the underfloor, which is a complex network of interacting vortices. All teams battle this problem, but Sauber was fighting them harder than most. It simply didn't have the quality of tools, simulation technology and understanding to control this, and the result was a peaky, difficult to drive car that regularly caught out Hülkenberg and Bortoleto. A big change was needed to fix that problem. The key upgrade introduced by Sauber this year, one that transformed it from no hope at a midfield powerhouse, appeared for the 9th race of the season in Spain. This comprised a new front wing, engine cover and, crucially, a new floor. That floor was originally scheduled to appear a couple of weeks earlier at Imola. However, the early season struggles forced the team to delay it to allow more development work. The result was a floor that not only improved the downforce levels, but more importantly created a package that was less peaky, more consistent and therefore easier to drive. This meant that on top of the expected performance gain from upping the grip, the drivers were better able to attack. That led to a compound performance gain, and a bigger one than expected. Hülkenberg immediately felt the difference, as did Bortoleto when he had the upgrade bolted on for Saturday. This allowed Hülkenberg to finish an astonishing 5th in the Grand Prix. While that was assisted by a safety car that allowed him to pit and bolt on fresh soft compound Pirellis, which allowed him to make late gains, he was on course for 9th on merit before that happened. And Bortoleto had the pace to have been in the points with him, but for a strategic gamble on a long first stint. As Hülkenberg said after the race, Sauber was now on the map in the midfield fight. This was the start of a remarkable run of results, one that has allowed Sauber to climb to 7th in the championship and be firmly in contention in the midfield battle for 5th. In fact, it's the highest scoring midfield team across the past 6 events. Hülkenberg banked more points in the Canadian Grand Prix, the race after Spain, with both cars then finishing in the points in the next race in Austria. That was helped by another floor upgrade. Then came Silverstone, where Hülkenberg took his famous first F1 podium finish with 3rd place in a rain-hit race. That was a remarkable result, albeit after a dismal qualifying performance with both Saubers falling in Q1. But again, it showed Sauber had the race pace to be a points threat everywhere. And that followed a 3rd floor upgrade in 4 races that evolved the initial Spain step with further changes to the shape. Those subsequent upgrades were not originally planned, but the result of what Rueda calls a different avenue of development being opened up. A remarkable run into the August break was completed with Bortoleto finishing 9th in Belgium, then 6th at the Hungaroring. Crucially, on top of his strong race pace, he reached Q3 on both occasions. While the Sauber has improved its single lap performance, that hasn't made a huge dent in its average deficit to the front. But that long run pace is vastly improved thanks to the big gains in what team principal Jonathan Wheatley calls drivability. That means more confidence and, most importantly, a balance that makes tyre management easier. One upgrade can lead to improvements, but what you are always looking for in F1 is consistent progress. The fact Sauber has introduced subsequent upgrades that have worked is proof of big improvements behind the scenes at Hinwil. Those lie in the tools used for development and, most importantly, the way that wind tunnel and CFD data is correlated with trackside data to drive design. These complex ground effect cars have forced all teams to change the way they analyse the numbers and, crucially, what numbers you're looking for to make a car that works across a good corner speed range, with a wide working window, and that works on track as expected. Sauber has been all at sea on that score. Until now. Getting results in F1 isn't just about having a quick car in all conditions, it's also about execution. This is another area where Sauber has made gains. Last year the team made too many mistakes, and that's not just about the early pit stop disasters, which were actually a problem with components rather than the ability of the crew. But strategy often backfired. There were errors in the garage and even problems with manufacturing, with a batch of front wings early in the season mostly having flaws that led to failures. The team was also publicly defensive and tended towards covering up these problems. That attitude appeared to be reflected in the way it worked internally as well. However, with a team that still comprises largely the same personnel, it has been transformed this year. Partly that's down to the influence of Wheatley. However, he only arrived in April, so this is also down to Binotto's arrival. There have been some key changes and reshuffles. Rueda, who worked with Binotto at Ferrari, joined last October, with racing director Xevi Pujolar departing over the winter. There have been changes to the ways of working that have helped to make it a much sharper team. There's also been improvements in terms of communication and organisational structures, according to Wheatley. Add to that the performance of the drivers, with veteran Nico Hülkenberg producing some well-executed race drives and Bortoleto showing his class with 3 points finishes in 4 events before the break, and it adds up to a team transformed. And that's against a backdrop of a team that has focused on the 2026 car as its main project, with the gains on the current machine the result of a targeted approach by a smaller group who focused on the Sauber C45. That's given the team genuine credibility as it heads towards the start of the Audi era next year. There's still a long way to go in achieving the target of fighting for wins by the end of the decade, and next year could still be tough with a brand new power unit. But Sauber has achieved real credibility on track and shown evidence that the transformation behind the scenes is delivering tangible results. 6 months ago, Audi's nascent works team was something of a joke. Now, all the evidence is that it's getting serious. And given Audi's potential, this means that for the first time, it looks like it could become a genuine contender in the long term.